The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as I watched my mother-in-law embrace the woman who destroyed my marriage. 3 years of devotion, of trying to earn their acceptance, of sacrificing everything for a family that never wanted me, all reduced to this moment. But death has a way of showing you the truth. And when I opened my eyes again, I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first time I met Rebecca Hartwell, I should have known she would be my downfall. She glided into the Montgomery family estate like she owned it, her designer heels clicking against the polished floors with the confidence of someone who had walked these halls 1,000 times before. Which, as I would later learn, Vivian, darling, you must meet Rebecca. My mother-in-law Eleanor Montgomery practically sang as she pulled the stunning blonde toward me. She's like a daughter to us. Marcus and Rebecca were so close growing up. The way Eleanor's eyes lit up when she spoke about Rebecca made my stomach twist. In the 3 months since I'd married Marcus, I'd never seen that warmth directed at me. Rebecca extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile bright enough to light up the entire ballroom. "So you're the famous Vivian," she said, her voice carrying just enough honey to mask whatever lay beneath. "Marcus has told me absolutely everything about you." I forced a smile and shook her hand, trying not to notice how Eleanor hung on every word. Rebecca spoke, how the other family members gravitated toward her like she was magnetic north. This was supposed to be the annual Montgomery Charity Gala, my first as Marcus's wife, and I had spent weeks preparing. I'd studied the guest list, memorized the family's philanthropic history, and chosen my dress with painstaking care. Yet within minutes of Rebecca's arrival, I might as well have been invisible. Rebecca just returned from her medical residency in Switzerland, Eleanor continued, beaming with pride. Top of her class at Johns Hopkins, you know, such an accomplished young woman. How wonderful, I managed, watching as Marcus appeared at Rebecca's side as if summoned by some invisible force. His face transformed when he saw her, taking on an expression I realized with growing horror that I'd never seen him wear when looking at me. "Becca," he breathed, and there was something in the way he said her name, a familiarity and intimacy that made my chest tighten. "You look incredible," she laughed, the sound like silver bells, and touched his arm in a gesture so natural it spoke of years of practice. "You're not so bad yourself, Mark. Marriage suits you." But she wasn't looking at him like a man who belonged to someone else, and he wasn't acting like it either. The evening spiraled downward from there. During dinner, I found myself seated between Marcus's cousin James, who spent the entire meal talking about Rebecca's achievements, and family friend Patricia Wells, who regaled me with stories of Marcus and Rebecca's childhood adventure. They spoke about her like she was already family, like she'd never left, like I was the interloper in this perfect picture they'd painted. They were inseparable, Patricia whispered to me as we watched Marcus and Rebecca dancing to the string quartet. Everyone thought they'd end up together, but then she got that scholarship to study abroad. Broke poor Marcus's heart when she left. My wine glass trembled in my hand, but that was years ago. "Oh, darling," Patricia's laugh was patronizing. "Some bonds never break. They have so much history together, so much in common, both from the same world. You understand." I understood perfectly. I understood that I would never be from their world, no matter how hard I tried. My father was a mechanic from Ohio, not a senator. My mother was a nurse, not a socialite. I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college, not attended prestigious boarding schools in Connecticut. When the evening finally ended, I rode home in silence beside Marcus, watching the city lights blur past the window of his Tesla. He was distracted, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel, his mind clearly elsewhere. "She seems lovely," I ventured, as we pulled into our driveway. "Who?" But he knew exactly who I meant. "Rebecca." "Oh yeah, she's great. It's good to have her back." His tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear the undercurrent of something deeper. That night, as I lay in our king-sized bed, listening to Marcus's steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself I was overreacting. So what if his family adored his childhood friend? So what if she was accomplished and beautiful and shared their background? I was his wife. I wore his ring. I shared his name. But over the following weeks, as Rebecca seamlessly integrated herself back into the Montgomery family orbit, my confidence began to crumble. She showed up to family dinners, holiday celebrations, even casual weekend gatherings. Eleanor would call her directly, bypassing me entirely when planning events. Marcus's sister Jennifer would text Rebecca about family news before telling me. His brother David would invite Rebecca to golf outings that I didn't even know were happening. "It's not intentional," Marcus said one evening when I finally worked up the courage to bring it up. "They've known her forever. It's just a habit." "What about building new habits?" I asked. "What about including your wife?" He sighed, the way he did when he found me tedious. "Viv, you're being paranoid. Rebecca is family. There's room for both of you." But there wasn't room for both of us, and we all knew. Every family photo she appeared in, every inside joke she shared with Marcus, every knowing glance between her and Eleanor, chipped away at my place in this family I'd tried so desperately to join. The breaking point came during Marcus's birthday party. I'd spent weeks planning it, coordinating with the caterers, designing the invitations, and booking his favorite band. But when Rebecca offered to help with the decorations, Eleanor practically pushed me aside. "Oh, Rebecca, you have such exquisite taste," Eleanor gushed. "Why don't you take over the aesthetic elements? Vivian can handle the practical things." I found myself relegated to checking coats and refilling ice buckets, while Rebecca held court in my own living room, accepting compliments on decorations I wasn't allowed to touch. The final insult came when it was time for toasts. Eleanor stood up, raised her glass and spoke for 10 minutes about what a wonderful man Marcus was, how proud she was of him, and how happy the family was to have Rebecca back where she belonged. She never mentioned me at all. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I escaped to our bedroom, tears streaming down my face. Through the window I could see Rebecca and Marcus in the garden standing close together under the string lights I'd hung myself. They were talking intently, her hand resting on his chest, his head bent toward hers. "There you are." Eleanor's voice behind me made me jump. "I was looking for you." I wiped my eyes quickly. "Just tired. It was a long day." "Yes, well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss." Eleanor moved to stand beside me at the window, following my gaze to where her son and his first love stood in what looked like an intimate embrace. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your place in this family." My blood turned to ice. "My place?" "You're a sweet girl, Vivian. But let's not pretend this marriage is what any of us expected for Marcus. You come from such different backgrounds, and now that Rebecca is back." She let the sentence hang in the air like a threat. "Rebecca isn't married to your son," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am." Eleanor's laugh was cold. "Oh, darling, marriage is just paperwork. Real connection, real compatibility, real love, that's something else entirely. Marcus married you during a rebellious phase, when he was angry with his father and wanted to prove something, but that's over now. He's remembering who he really is, where he really belongs. You're asking me to leave my husband. I'm suggesting you make this easy on everyone, especially yourself." Eleanor's voice carried the steel that had made her a formidable political wife for 30 years, a generous settlement, a quiet divorce, a fresh start somewhere far from Boston. "You could build a nice life for yourself, somewhere more suitable." I turned to face her fully, seeing clearly for the first time the woman who had smiled and air-kissed me for months while planning my destruction. "And if I refuse, then you'll discover just how unpleasant we can make life for people who don't know their place." Her smile was razor sharp. "Ask yourself, Vivian, do you really want to fight a battle you can't possibly win?" Through the window I watched Marcus lean down and kiss Rebecca's forehead, a gesture so tender and familiar it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. At that moment, I understood that I had already lost. The war had been over before it began, and I'd been too naive to realize I was even fighting one. "I need time to think," I whispered. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need." Eleanor patted my arm with false sympathy. "But don't take too long. These situations have a way resolving themselves. with or without cooperation. After she left, I sank onto our bed, the bed I'd shared with Marcus for 8 months, where we'd whispered plans for our future, where I'd dreamed of growing old together. Now it felt like sleeping in enemy territory. I should have left that night. I should have packed my bags and walked away with whatever dignity I had left. Instead, I stayed and fought for a man who had already chosen someone else, for a family that had never wanted me, for a life that was never really mine to begin with, and that decision would cost me everything, including my life. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who looked embarrassed to be there. I stared at the thick manila envelope on our kitchen counter, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Marcus had already left for work, but I knew he'd seen them. The way he'd avoided eye contact during breakfast, the careful distance he'd maintained while moving around our kitchen, it all made sense now. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The legal language was clinical, reducing our marriage to assets and liabilities. But what made my breath catch was the proposed settlement. It was generous, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Enough to disappear quietly, to start over somewhere. The Montgomery name meant nothing. Attached was a handwritten note in Eleanor's elegant script, "For your cooperation and discretion. A fresh start awaits." I was still staring at the papers when my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, "We need to talk tonight. I'm sorry it came to this." As if our marriage had been a business deal gone wrong, rather than sacred vows we'd exchanged in front of God and our families. As if I was a problem to be solved rather than the woman he'd promised to love and cherish. But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. That afternoon, I drove to Marcus's law firm, determined to fight for what we'd built together. The receptionist looked uncomfortable when I asked to see my husband, making whispered phone calls before reluctantly allowing me upstairs. I found Marcus in his corner office. But he wasn't alone. Rebecca sat across from his desk, legal documents spread between them. She looked perfectly at home in the leather chair, her legs crossed elegantly, discussing what appeared to be a business matter with the ease of someone who belonged in his world. "Vivian," Marcus stood quickly, guilt written across his face. "I didn't expect you. I can see that." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What's going on here?" "Rebecca's helping me with the Hartford Medical Center acquisition," he said, but the explanation felt rehearsed. "Her expertise in healthcare law is invaluable." Rebecca smiled sympathetically. "I hope you don't mind, Vivian. Marcus mentioned you might be uncomfortable with me working so closely with the firm, but this project is too important to let personal feelings interfere." The way she said it, so reasonable, so professional, made me sound petty for even questioning it. Of course, how silly of me to be concerned about my husband working late nights with his ex-girlfriend. "Vivian," Marcus's tone carried a warning. "Can we discuss this at home?" "No, I think it is perfect here." I stepped fully into the office, closing the door behind me. Since Rebecca seems to be involved in all our family decisions anyway, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Rebecca gathered her papers with practiced efficiency. "I should go. You two clearly have things to work out." She paused beside me on her way to the door, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "You know, Vivian, sometimes the kindest thing we can do is step aside gracefully. Marcus deserves to be happy." After she left, Marcus and I faced each other across his mahogany desk, like opposing counsel. The man I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd wooed me with poetry and surprise picnics, had been replaced by this cold stranger who couldn't meet my eyes. "The papers are fair," he said finally. "More than fair. I don't want your money, Marcus. I want my husband back." "That's not possible anymore." His voice was quiet but final. "Too much has changed." "You mean Rebecca came back?" He didn't deny it. "We grew apart, Viv. We want different things, different lives. It's better to end this cleanly than drag it out." Different things. We talked about having children, buying a house in the suburbs, and growing old together. When did those become different things? Those were fantasies. His words hit like physical blows. I was trying to be someone I'm not, but I can't keep pretending. Pretending to love me. The silence stretched between us, answering my question more clearly than words ever could. I walked out of his office with whatever dignity I had left. But I didn't sign the paper. Instead, I threw myself into saving our marriage with the desperation of someone trying to hold water in cupped hands. I cooked his favorite meals, planned romantic evenings, and tried to recapture what we'd lost. But Marcus had already checked out, going through the motions of being a husband while his heart belonged to someone else. The worst part was watching Rebecca play the role of the innocent bystander. She attended family dinners where she and Marcus discussed cases and shared inside jokes while I sat silent at the table. She showed up to charity events on Marcus's arm, just as friends. Eleanor would announce, since poor Vivian doesn't enjoy these functions. She even had keys to our house, ostensibly for work purposes. But I'd come home to find evidence of her presence, a coffee cup in the sink, her perfume lingering in Marcus's study, legal briefs with her handwriting scattered across his desk. "You're being paranoid," Marcus said when I confronted him about the keys. "Rebecca and I are working together, that's all." But I wasn't paranoid. I was desperate, and desperate people make dangerous mistakes. I hired a private investigator, thinking that if I could prove Marcus and Rebecca were having an affair, I could force him to see what he was throwing away. The photos the investigator brought me 3 weeks later showed exactly what I'd expected. Marcus and Rebecca entering hotels together, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through Back Bay like lovers. But when I confronted Marcus with the evidence, he didn't deny it. "I know this hurts," he said, his voice gentle for the first time in months. "But can't you see, this is proof that we're not right for each other. If I was truly happy with you, I never would have strayed. You're having an affair and somehow this is my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault, I'm saying it's reality. Rebecca and I have a connection that's worth destroying our marriage for. That's worth being honest about." He sat down heavily on our couch, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. "I should never have married you, Vivian. It wasn't fair to either of us. You deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone who's settling." Settling. The word echoed in my chest like a death knell. "So what now?" I whispered. "Now you sign the papers. Take the settlement. Build a life with someone who can give you what you need. And you'll marry Rebecca." "Eventually, yes, after the divorce is final. After some time has passed. My family adores her. She understands my world. We want the same things. It makes sense." Makes sense. Our entire marriage was reduced to a logic problem that didn't compute. I signed the papers that night. My signature shaky but final. Marcus moved out the next day, taking only his clothes and personal items, leaving behind the life we'd built like it meant nothing. The house felt cavernous without him, filled with echoes of conversations we'd never have and dreams we'd never share. But the real betrayal came 2 weeks later, when Eleanor called to inform me that the family would be hosting an engagement party for Marcus and Rebecca. "It's nothing personal, dear." Eleanor's voice dripped false sympathy. "But you understand that it would be inappropriate for you to attend. These things are better handled separately. The divorce isn't even final yet. A technicality. The important thing is that Marcus is finally where he belongs, with someone who truly understands him." I hung up and screamed until my throat was raw, then collapsed on my kitchen floor and sobbed until there were no tears left. Everything I'd sacrificed, every humiliation I'd endured, every desperate attempt to earn their acceptance. It had all been for nothing. They'd never seen me as anything more than an obstacle to their perfect plan. The engagement party was held at the Montgomery estate, the same ballroom where I'd first met Rebecca. I wasn't invited, but I drove there anyway, parking across the street and watching through the tall windows as the people I'd once considered family celebrated my replacement. Rebecca looked radiant in ivory silk, accepting congratulations and well wishes while Marcus beamed beside her. Eleanor held court near the champagne fountain, regaling guests with stories of how she'd always known Rebecca was perfect for her son. I sat in my car for 2 hours, torturing myself with glimpses of the life Marcus had chosen over me. When I finally drove away, I made a decision that would define everything that came next. I was done being the victim in their story. If they wanted me gone, I'd disappear, but not quietly, and not without making them pay for what they'd taken from me. The Montgomery family had no idea that by destroying me, they'd created their own worst nightmare. They thought they'd won, but the game was just beginning, and I was about to change all the rules. The rain was coming down in sheets the night I decided to end it all. Not my life. Something far more satisfying. I was going to end the Montgomery family's stranglehold on Boston's legal elite, and I knew exactly how to do it. It started with a phone call to someone I never thought I'd contact. Daniel Cross, Marcus's biggest rival and the one person in Boston who hated the Montgomery name as much as I was learning to. Cross and Associates had been locked in a bitter feud with Montgomery Law for over a decade, ever since Daniel's father was pushed out of their original partnership by Marcus's grandfather. The rivalry was legendary in legal circles. Professional, personal, and absolutely ruthless. Miss Montgomery. Daniel's voice was smooth as bourbon when he answered my call. This is unexpected. It's Miss Parker now. Or it will be once the divorce is final. Ah. I could hear the interest in his voice. And what can I do for you, Miss Parker? I have information about Montgomery Law that might interest you. Information about their client acquisition methods, their billing practices, and some very interesting conflicts of interest involving city contracts. The silence stretched for a long moment. That's a serious accusation. I have documentation. During my months of trying to fit into the Montgomery family, I'd been privy to conversations I shouldn't have heard, seen documents I shouldn't have seen, learned about deals that wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. Marcus had been careless around me, assuming I was too naive to understand the implications of what I was witnessing. He was wrong. I think we should meet, Daniel said finally. 3 days later I sat across from Daniel Cross in his penthouse office, watching him review the files I'd compiled. He was nothing like Marcus, where my soon-to-be ex-husband was polished and conventional. Daniel was sharp edges and dangerous intelligence, dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it, a scar along his jaw that spoke of a rougher past, and eyes that missed nothing. This is impressive work, he said, closing the last folder. Very thorough, very damaging. Enough to hurt them, enough to destroy them if handled correctly. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with unnerving intensity. The question is, what do you want in return? Justice. That's not payment. That's motivation. What do you actually want? I met his gaze directly. I want to watch their empire crumble. I want Marcus to lose everything he values more than me, and I want Eleanor Montgomery to understand what it feels like to be powerless. Daniel smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression I'd ever seen. I think we can work together. What followed was 6 months of careful, calculated warfare. Daniel used my information to file complaints with the state bar, launched investigations into Montgomery Law's business practices, and began systematically poaching their biggest clients. But that was just the legal side. The personal destruction was far more satisfying. I transformed myself during those months, using my divorce settlement to hire the best stylists, trainers, and etiquette coaches money could buy. If the Montgomerys wanted to judge me for not being sophisticated enough, I'd show them what real sophistication looked like. I attended every charity gala, every cultural event, every society function in Boston, not as Marcus's embarrassing wife, but as Daniel Cross's mysterious companion. The first time we appeared together at the Opera House, I felt the collective gasp ripple through the audience. There was Marcus, sitting in his family's usual box with Rebecca, both of them staring at me in shock as Daniel escorted me to even better seats in the center orchestra section. "You look stunning," Daniel murmured in my ear, his hand warm on my back. "Are you ready for this?" I was more than ready. I was reborn. The transformation wasn't just external. Working with Daniel, I discovered a ruthless intelligence I never knew I possessed. He taught me how to read people, how to manipulate situations, how to turn my supposed weaknesses into weapons. My humble background, which Eleanor had used against me, became an asset when dealing with jurors and working-class clients. My desperation to belong, which Marcus had found pathetic, became an understanding of human nature that made me formidable in negotiation. "You're wasted on Marcus Montgomery," Daniel told me one evening as we reviewed strategy in his office. "He never deserved you." "No," I said, my voice steady. "He didn't." By winter, Montgomery Law was hemorrhaging clients and facing 3 separate bar investigations. Marcus looked haggard at the society events we both attended, his perfect facade cracking under the pressure. Eleanor had stopped hosting her famous dinner parties, unable to face the whispered speculation about her family's downfall. Even Rebecca seemed less confident, her medical career suffering as her association with the Montgomery scandal made headlines. But I wasn't satisfied with professional destruction. I wanted personal devastation to match what they'd done to me. The opportunity came when I overheard Eleanor and Patricia Wells discussing Marcus and Rebecca's wedding plans at the country club. They were planning a spring ceremony at the family estate, a lavish affair meant to restore the Montgomery name's tarnished reputation. "Such a relief to have that unfortunate business with Vivian behind us," Eleanor was saying. "Rebecca is so much more suitable. The wedding will remind everyone of what the Montgomery family represents." I smiled and excused myself to make a phone call. "Daniel," I said when he answered, "how would you feel about getting married?" The silence was pregnant with possibility. "Are you proposing to me?" "Vivian Parker. I'm proposing a merger. A hostile takeover of everything the Montgomerys hold dear." "When?" "1 week before Marcus and Rebecca's wedding." Daniel's laughter was rich and dark. "You magnificent, vindictive woman." "Yes, we were married on a Saturday in April, in a ceremony that made every society page in New England." The guest list read like a who's who of Boston's elite: judges, politicians, business leaders, and every client the Montgomerys had lost to Daniel's firm. The venue was the Four Seasons, more elegant than the Montgomery state could ever be. My dress was Vera Wang. My flowers were white orchids flown in from Hawaii. And my groom was the most powerful man in Boston legal circles. But the real masterpiece was the guest list. Through careful social maneuvering, I'd managed to schedule our wedding the same weekend as 3 other major social events, ensuring that most of Boston's elite would have to choose which wedding to attend. They chose Marcus and Rebecca's wedding the following week was a humiliating affair by comparison. Half their expected guests sent regrets. The social media coverage was minimal, and the few photos that did surface showed a noticeably smaller, less impressive gathering. The Montgomerys looked positively provincial, Patricia Wells told anyone who would listen. "Did you see Eleanor's face when she realized the Ashford family chose the Cross wedding over theirs?" But my revenge wasn't complete. There was still one more move to make. 6 months after my wedding to Daniel, I was pregnant. The announcement came with impeccable timing, just as Marcus and Rebecca were struggling with fertility issues that were becoming increasingly public knowledge. Eleanor, who had spent years dismissing me as unsuitable breeding stock for her precious bloodline, was forced to watch as I carried the child of her family's greatest enemy. The final blow came when Daniel's investigations into Montgomery Law finally bore fruit. Marcus was disbarred for ethical violations. The family firm was dissolved, and their assets were frozen pending criminal charges. Eleanor, the grande dame of Boston society, was reduced to selling jewelry to pay legal fees. I ran into Marcus at the courthouse the day the verdict was announced. He looked older, broken, a shadow of the confident man who had dismissed me as a temporary mistake. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. She'd filed for divorce the moment the criminal charges were announced, unwilling to sink with the Montgomery ship. "Vivian," he said, my name a whisper of regret. "It's Mrs. Cross now," I replied, my hand resting protectively over my growing belly. "I know I have no right to ask, but was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me?" I studied his face. This man who had once been my entire world, who had reduced me to begging for scraps of affection from his family. "I loved the man I thought you were, but that man never existed, did he? He was just another performance for your audience. And then," he gestured vaguely at my obvious pregnancy, my designer clothes, the life I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. "Is this real or just revenge?" I smiled, the expression containing multitudes. "Maybe both. Maybe that's what makes it perfect." As I walked away from Marcus Montgomery for the last time, I felt the baby kick inside me, the next generation of the Cross legacy, growing strong while the Montgomery name faded into infamy. Daniel was waiting for me outside the courthouse, his face lighting up when he saw me. "How did it go?" he asked, taking my hand. "It's finished," I said. "They have nothing left. And us? What do we have?" I looked at this man who had helped me transform from victim to victor, who had seen my potential when I couldn't see it myself, who had stood by my side as I reclaimed my power. What we had was complicated, built on mutual need, and shared ambition rather than the naive romantic love I'd felt for Marcus, but it was real in a way my first marriage had never been. "We have everything," I said, and meant. The Montgomery family learned too late that destroying someone's life can have consequences they never anticipated. They thought they were discarding an inconvenient obstacle, but they'd actually created their most dangerous enemy. By choosing Rebecca over me, they'd lost everything that truly mattered: their reputation, their fortune, their future. And I had gained a husband who valued my strength, a child who would carry on a legacy of power, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living better than your enemies ever dreamed possible. The girl who had begged for acceptance from the Montgomery family was dead. In her place stood Vivian Cross, matriarch of a new dynasty, mother to the next generation of Boston's elite, and living proof that underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake of your life. Eleanor Montgomery had been right about one thing: some people don't know their place, but she'd been wrong about which person that was. It wasn't me who didn't belong in their world. It was them who didn't belong to me. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest upload.